most comfortable with the feed for the livestock and the horses as I am the actual horses themselves. So I'm going to talk about pasture management tonight and also hay and hay production. So I'll focus on more of the growth of the grass and the harvesting of the hay to give you an idea of what it takes to feed quality hay, how to produce that, to make your pastures productive. A good, healthy pasture can help your horse, obviously. It'll also help your budget, your bottom line. If you can save some feed costs by utilizing your pasture more efficiently, it definitely helps your bottom line. So at our farm, we raise field crops, corn, soybeans, hay, and straw, and I raise produce, sweet corn, tomatoes, that sort of thing. That's my second full-time job other than being at Penn State. So how about you guys? I'm just trying to gather where you are at. What are you, sophomores, juniors, seniors? What's the mix in the room here? Junior? So have you had any field crops and forages, Steve, to brew? Is that one of your classes you've taken? Yeah. So some of the stuff might come back and you go, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that. So that any of you live or own your own horse, so you happen to manage some pastures at home, or maybe here, you get involved with that at all. But hopefully this helps you understand why we try and do fencing pastures, breaking up pastures into smaller paddocks to make the grass grow. Because horses are the toughest animals or livestock on a pasture. I mean, you can put cattle out on a pasture 24/7, 365 days a year, and it won't look near as bad as if you have horses on that pasture. So that being said, I have handouts for you. The first one on top is what we're going to start with, is the importance of pastures and setting realistic goals. That's the key thing, I think, is what do you expect out of your pasture? If you know you have 5 horses on 1 acre, it's going to be really hard to have a green, productive pasture that feeds your horse. You won't supply the nutrition needs of your horse for that small acreage. So that's really kind of what we're going to start with. You can see that's a little bit dull, but so what is that pasture? It's that area of land, usually a half acre or more. Doesn't have to be exactly, but if it's less than a half acre, most of the time if you have any horses on there, it's going to be beat up and pretty much dirt and not producing any feed. But it's grasses and legumes. If you think back to some of our basic field crops or feeds and forages, remember what a legume does that a grass doesn't? What does it supply? Yes, it supplies nitrogen to itself, so you don't have to fertilize clover, alfalfa. Those would be the most typical legumes you might see in a pasture, and clover is by far the most common. There's different kinds of clover, but and most oftentimes you have clover and grass in that pasture, and that clover can help supply nitrogen to the grass, but it doesn't supply all the nutrients that plant needs. So the pasture plants, they contain the quality feed that your animals need: carbohydrates, fat, protein, vitamins, minerals, and also water. If you think of the moisture in those plants, they're probably at least 50 to 80% water at the time when they're grazed. So it helps. It helps them. They won't drink near as much when they're eating a good quality pasture. Get you some nuts here. There you go. And if you have a pasture that's well maintained and productive, you won't need to feed your horse any additional feed. You can supply all the nutrient needs of your horse. So that's really key. So if you have, tell people to think about when you mow your yard. You don't mow your yard in the wintertime, right? So the grass isn't growing at all in the winter. It may be somewhat green, but if it sprays down, it's not going to regrow. But come April, it starts to green up, and you can start grazing. April through about this time of year, now the grass has just about stopped its growth. But that's 6 months almost. If you have your pastures well maintained, you can have 6 months of feed, a half a year of feed that you don't have to buy hay to feed your horses, and that's significant. So it can be a real cost savings for you as a manager. Just a little bit more details on what's in a grass pasture. So this is like a bluegrass or orchard grass. I'm going to do this in a little more detail. But there's a fair amount of protein, up to 15% protein. That's basically the nitrogen concentration in that grass. I'll go into these a little bit more later when we get into hay. Have you guys talked about feed analysis reports, that sort of thing? NDF, ADF, it's not the simplest thing in the world, but it's about the fiber in that plant. There's sugar, there's starch, other carbohydrates, there's fat, there's other elements as well. So although these elements are small, they are important, so they can help give your horse a balanced diet, and you probably are going to feed additional free choice or supplements as well. But it's a good base for your nutritional needs for your horse. As I go, right? If any questions, feel free to let me know as I go along. So as we think about pastures, there's a lot of other advantages. Horses are range animals. They didn't originate in a 100 by 100 pen, right? They wanted room to roam. So having that exercise space for normal behavior, that social interaction is important. So that's key to have them out where they can roam around, have freedom to move. That's what is challenging to me when people say, well, I go out to do farm visits to people that have horses, and say, well, I have 10 horses, but these couple can't get along, and now I have to have 3 different groups. And I try and tell them, we'd like to separate your pastures so that it gets rest. It doesn't get grazed every day, all the time, but they don't have enough pastures to rotate their animals around. It's usually one group just follows another group. They rotate their animals, but there's always a group of horses on that same pasture that doesn't get the rest that it needs. So by far the most problem that we see in the area is just lack of acreage and too many animals on an acre.
How much would you say would a pasture need rest?
It depends on how fast the grass is growing. In the spring, when it's growing quickly, it might take 2 to 3 weeks to regrow.
So you can't have horses there for 2 or 3 weeks?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
Yes. All this would be in the ideal condition, and I know some people might give it a week. A week's better than no time at all.
Okay. Can you tell by looking at the pasture?
You can. If you basically look down and you can kind of judge the height. If it's 6 or 8 inches tall, that's good in many cases.
Okay.
We'd love to see a little more, but you don't want your grass going to head, getting the seed heads on them.
Okay.
I brought in some hay samples, but there's a Timothy head. If your grass is waist tall, starting to head, it's better that you clip it off so you get that grass growth coming back. But yeah, it's many times if I can get people to give it a 1 week on, 1 week off, that's an improvement over having them graze it every day, continuously. So as you're probably aware, if your horses are out moving around, you have less instances of colic, ulcers, that sort of thing. Heaves, these are areas that aren't my specialty, but as you know, if they're out moving and physically active, that's good. But also for the young foals, you can't quite see it here, but it helps increase their bone mineral content on pasture. So that's a great thing to have healthy foals. As I touched on earlier, you can reduce your hay $6, $8 a bale. And if your horse eats half a bale a day, that can really add up. You can utilize that pasture for 6 months out of the year and not have to feed the hay. Also, if you have pasture and you have the manure, you can utilize that manure back on the pasture, whether it's composted or just stacked and then applied later. But there's nutrients, there's fertilizer value in that manure. So if you can put that back on the pasture, it'll fertilize the grass, it'll grow cheap feed for you. It's a good situation. And it can be aesthetically pleasing to neighbors. It's why people like this area, because there's farms, there's pasture. There's just a nice aesthetically pleasing thing to see livestock or horses in a pasture. And it truly is. But when that pasture is brown and muddy and there's manure running down the road ditch, that's a different story. That's when they're going to call somebody and say, hey, this isn't right. And as a property owner, it isn't right. You're liable for the nutrients and the sediment that run off your property. So you need to ensure that you're not polluting the environment, and having good grass is a way to keep that soil in place. Are any of you aware of some of the nutrient management requirements, or manure management requirements? Has that been gone over in this class at all? You might know it from other ways. Yes, so like the state now, Department, I think it's EPA actually pushed it, but through the department, or DEP, any person with livestock now is required to have a written plan of how they're going to manage their manure, even if you have 2 horses. And that could be as simple as, well, I pile it and then I have somebody haul it out. But before it used to be, if you have 8 or more horses, you need to document how you handle your manure. Now it's anybody with any livestock, any number. So there's not near enough people to enforce it. But if there is a complaint from a disgruntled neighbor or something like that, and someone from the county would come out to investigate, they would ask to see your nutrient management plan, your mineral management plan, and they would probably educate you on what you're required to do to comply with those requirements. But it is serious. When there's animals in a creek, where they have access to a creek, they're usually going to crack, or the manure is going to fall in the creek, and that's going to pollute it. They're going to graze down the edges of that stream and cause that stream to erode and take the sediment along with it. So there's a lot of focus in keeping the animals out of the streams, creating buffers, and having areas where the grass is larger or taller along the stream so it can filter out any manure. Not to say that you can't ever have your animals near that stream area, but you can't have access to it all the time. That's just a little bit update on, there's lots of people looking at agriculture as a polluting problem, and there are areas where it's a problem, but horses were never included in agriculture, and now by definition, they are part of the nutrient management or manure management requirements. Because there was a lot of farmers saying, hey, what about that horse owner over there who's got 15 horses in this small area? So, but there's a lot, I'm not sure how many horses in Pennsylvania, but tens of thousands. So that's all for that one there. Talking about the manure, also you're not just spreading manure with your manure spreader on the pastures, but they're spreading their own manure, right? When they're in pasture, they're dropping manure out where they are, so there's less bedding to deal with, there's less stalls to clean out, that's saving you time, saving you your labor costs, and the cost of shavings. It's the time to do all that, and removing it from the barn and taking it out, and dealing with that. So the more time that can be out of the stalls, as you know, it's easier for you and it's better for the horse. So, but trying to keep the pasture productive at the same time is the challenge that you have to deal with as the manager there. So trying to keep your pastures productive erosion, keeping the soil in place. The raindrop has a powerful force as it hits bare ground, and it loosens up the soil and then it can wash away. But if you have plant material there, it reduces that impact of that raindrop. It slowly comes down to the soil and doesn't have near the energy or the erosion potential. Having good vegetation in the pasture recycles those nutrients, so that manure or fertilizer, most of the manure that you would apply or the horses drop are going to be soaked up in the ground and used up by those plants very rapidly. So they won't have a chance to run off and pollute a waterway or stream. And again, open space, be it a pasture or a field, it's going to allow groundwater recharge. So when it rains, that water soaks into the ground, into our aquifers, and doesn't just run off. We know with all the increased development, there's plenty of accelerated runoff. We see the flash floods in parking lots and big areas like that. Having more fields obviously allows that water to soak in and doesn't flood. And again, it looks good for the surrounding community. And it's key because people do watch what happens on your property, whatever they can see from the road, and you're responsible to keep your property in good, healthy, non-polluting conditions. And it's interesting because some people are much more nosy than others, right? We get asked a lot of interesting questions. I said, why did you do this in this field or that sort of thing? Because it's different than the norm. Sometimes people are very curious as to why you did that. But it's not all rosy with pastures. There are complications. It's not perfect by any means. As we have these grasses, we're going to get weeds in those areas, especially when the grass gets grazed down closer to the ground. More weed seeds can emerge because they have an opportunity, very opportunistic. Certain weeds like to come up in the late summer. As the grass gets down close, they can then take off and be very competitive. And then with these legumes, so I'll back up to the grasses. There are certain grasses that have some challenges with them. Fescue, the tall fescue with the endophyte, that's in there. That can be a problem for your late gestation mares. And then there are certain legumes like outside clover that can cause the slobbers for the horses. So we have some weeds like gypsum, yellow star thistle, pokeweed. I'm going to show a picture of that one here. Have you seen? That's kind of a bad picture, but they call it inkberry. It has a purple berry. It can get 12 feet tall sometimes. You might have it on your manure pile. It grows huge near the manure pile. But they are poisonous berries. You want to be cautious. Typically, this isn't going to be, it might be in a pasture, usually along an edge, an area that gets a lot of traffic because it doesn't really come up in the middle of the grass pasture, but usually in the areas that are pretty beat up or around the manure pile. The other one is, this is tall fescue. A little tough to see, but it's a coarse plated grass, and that's the one that has the endophyte affecting that. It's basically a fungus that helps the plant. It allows it to ward off some stresses. But if you have mares that are pregnant, it's that third trimester where it can cause some abortions in them. So most of the time it's not an issue, but it could possibly be. And the last one is clover. This is outside clover. It's like a pinkish, whitish pinkish flower. It's not the short white clover you see. It's only a few inches tall. This will get a foot or more tall. That can cause some slobbers on the horses. It's usually not a big deal, but you might notice that. Yes?
With the yellow star things, the inkberry thing, is that an issue with horses consuming that usually, or is it more?
They really won't eat it unless there's nothing else for them to
Unless
eat.
there's a star there.
Yeah, and this is my biggest question on our weeds. poisonous plants and weeds is probably one of the main questions I get. Can you come out and identify the weeds or poisonous plants on the pasture? And I said, I can. And you're going to be scared because we're going to walk through and I'll find 10 different weeds that are poisonous. And you're going, well, now what? But your horses have been on it for a number of years and they haven't been affected by it. So, feed them adequately, provide the best pasture management you can, and they're not going to go after these undesirable plants because they don't taste good to them in many cases. They're not going to choose them over grass or clover.
Or is that in a dry lot scenario? If they're fed sufficiently in hay or anything, would it still be a concern?
Not typically, but in a dry lot, I would say spray or do something to kill it there. You could use Roundup and it wouldn't be a problem. In a pasture, you can't really spray Roundup because you're going to kill everything around it. But it is an option. I tell people you can go in with a small sprayer, just treat this one individual weed if you wish. But typically, if they're well fed and they're not hungry, they're not going to go after the poisonous plants. Now, some of them might have a story where they did, and it could be possible. But it seems it's the toughest when somebody has had a problem with a horse that they got sick and they suspect it might be a specific weed. Go out there and you find it, and it's hard because you can't physically see the horse ever eating it and knowing if that was the cause or not. And it's kind of tough because that person that I'm visiting with is really distraught because they may have lost a horse, and I'm saying, looking around, I don't see that it would have eaten that, might be something else, but sometimes you don't ever really know. It makes my life my job interesting when we come across those scenarios. There is a great resource book. It's called Weeds of the Northeast, and that's an excellent resource to find out what weeds are out there. And there's a lot of good apps now too. Weed ID is an app that I use to find out what different weeds are. But that's one of the things people always ask you what weeds are, so you kind of get good at that over time. So people bring me a leaf, and I could probably tell you what it is. Anything else on weeds? We'll move into parasites, another fun one. Again, I'm not an expert on parasites, but that spread of those gastrointestinal parasites can be an issue in a pasture. But it can be shed through the manure, again, but it's those highest stocking rates where it's usually a problem where they're forced to graze really close to the manure piles, and dragging the manure piles in the pasture is a good management practice. Follow good deworming practices, and you should be okay, but don't overlook the risk with the parasites. Because it can be an issue, but oftentimes we see that on farms with a fairly high stocking rate where there isn't that much grass in that pasture and they're nibbling every little leaf blade they can get, and they don't prefer to graze near their manure piles. You can pick them out. That's what I like to show people. I say, look at the potential of your pasture. It's grazed down to the ground, but over here we got grass that's a foot tall. It's not the grass's fault, it's the management. You're letting them graze it too close. If they didn't graze it, it would look like this grass over here where the manure piles are there, so they're not eating the grass down as low. Grass might be 8 inches tall or a foot tall. So the grass is physically in the field. It's you, the manager, needing to remove the horses for a period of time to let that grass get taller so that it will not be like a turf, putting green, that sort of thing. So here's the key. What are your goals for your pasture? What do you have to work with? Is it an exercise lot? Is it going to be a really close pasture? You just want to have your horses be able to go outside and exercise and be outdoors. You don't want to clean stalls as little as possible. But you have maybe 4 horses and only 2 acres, and it's going to be really tough that's much smaller, that you expect to not have grass on it, or where they're out on the pasture and it's just going to be an exercise lot. It's not really an area they're going to get much feed value from. Or maybe it's like this picture, it's a little fuzzy, but it is a nice lush pasture that can supply their feed for a number of months throughout the year. But it's up to you, what's your desire. Are you interested more in the horse, or you have a lot of interest in actually going to pasture? I'm a grass guy. I'm not an animal guy. We have cattle. I'm okay with it. We don't have any horses, so I'll leave it at that. Although my daughter wants one. When she does the work, she can get one. That hasn't happened yet. I tell her, you can buy all the hay that I make to feed your horse, and we'll see how that goes. So again, on the goals, finances definitely come into play. If you're running a boarding operation and your money is coming from the number of horses you have on your property, and you don't have enough acres to feed them, you're probably going to get another horse or two in because of that boarding income, because that's what's keeping your business going. How much suitable acreage do you have? If you have 50 acres and you can pasture 25 of it, and if you only have 10 or so horses, you could feed them for the whole half the year in that area. And time. How much time do you have? It does take time to manage pastures. It takes time to move them to a different area. So it depends on your time. And again, the number of livestock or horses you have per acre. And when they're on pasture, they need a source of water. So how are you going to get water to them without making them come back to the barn? Maybe you can have them come back to the barn, depending on the distance that it is. But thinking about how you lay out your fences so that they can have access to shade, have access to water. Because if it's 100 degrees, you're probably not going to want to be standing out in the pasture if they have to, unless they, for whatever reason, they might have to run in sheds or tree lines, that sort of thing. Good. So a little bit more about stocking rates. How many animals can you put on an acre? So for horses, it's typical to have, sometimes you might have 2 or 3 horses on 1 acre. In the best case scenario, that's just going to be an exercise lot. It's not really a productive pasture for the reasons I mentioned before. So think about if you have stocking rates to really supply a significant amount of nutrition, you're going to have to either back off stocking rates or give them much less time on that pasture. Because you want to keep your pastures or even your exercise areas vegetated or having grass on them, and not just paper thin amount of grass. There really should be a couple inches there. It should be as tall as your lawn. I've been in a lot of horse pastures. That's not the case. If they drove a lawnmower through there, they would only cut grass every once in a while. At that point, you should have horses off in the sacrifice area. So how much land does it take? If you have 1 horse and you have a ½ acre of pasture, you're looking at like 3 hours a day, less than that. Because in 3 hours they're going to eat the grass faster than it will grow. So they need to have 21 hours or 22 hours of either stall or exercise lot time to keep that pasture productive. Now if you have 1 acre, maybe your turnout time could be 3 or 5 hours, something like that. But still, all from morning till evening, they would eat it down too much. There's just 1 horse on 1 acre. Now if you're up to 1.5 acres, you could probably keep them out all day or all night. That's one horse on 1.5 acres of pasture. So if you have 2 acres, then you could leave them out day and night, because there's enough grass there for them to roam around and find what they want without making it a brown area. you're going to find out that they always naturally like certain areas of the pasture, like certain grasses. So they'll graze those short, and other grasses will get tall and go to head. They just selectively graze what they want. So even though they have 2 acres to go around, they're going to concentrate their time here, there, near the gate, where they get back to the barn sometimes, or near their shelter, near the water bowl, that sort of thing. So there's ways to force them to go different areas so they eat more of it completely. But this really is key. And I think 2 acres for 1 horse, 5 horses, 10 acres. I wish I had that much ground, right? So that's our biggest challenge in this part of the state. High land values, not enough acreage, and people want to keep more horses than they can really feed on the land that they have. So many of the pastures in this area are exercise lots. They don't have much feed value being produced from them. Any questions on this or challenges? I know for me it was like, I don't know if that's true, but the more you see it, the more it really is. So a little bit more on stocking rates. The more management you do, you can make them better. So if you would have said, yeah, but what if I soil test and I fertilize, I put lime on, so I'm giving my grass the best conditions it can to grow. I'm overseeding, I'm mowing my pastures, I rotate my animals. That's how you can get your animal densities higher. You can give, maybe it's, instead of we mentioned before, maybe it's 2 acres for 1 horse, maybe it's 1 acre per horse, because you'll rotate the horses to new grass every 4 or 5, 6 days. You'll give the grass a rest to regrow without, they'll be continuously grazing, but they'll be concentrated on a smaller area and then move to different paddocks, maybe every 2 days or something like that. So think about your pasture as a crop. As a farmer, we want to know what our soil fertility is. Does our grass and our hay fields, do they need phosphorus or potassium? The only way to know that is to do a soil test. Simple, poke a dozen or 15 holes, just a few inches deep, 3 to 5 inches deep, and we send that to the Penn State lab, and it gives a pretty detailed report. How much fertilizer we need to add to grow a certain amount of grass, and they're going to say, what do you expect? What's your yield that you expect? And that's where people get most confused. How much yield should I get off of a pasture? Anybody have an idea? How many tons a pasture might produce per acre? 10? 12? I'm leaving you wrong a little bit. But it's higher. 5 would be great. 2 is pretty common. 2 to 4. Under good management, you could get 5 or 6. But under, I'd say, basic management, I tell people 2 ton of that's dry matter, of actually not just wet, because when you were to chop it green, there's a lot of weight in that water. But like if you were to picture that into hay, you might get 100 bales off of an acre. That's a lot of feed, if you think of that. So if you put some fertilizer on in the spring and clip your pastures and rotate the animals around, and again fertilizer in the fall at this time of year, you can increase your yields and grow better grass and save yourself some feed.
Sorry.
Yes.
You know with the fertilizer, how you said you put up once, like in the spring and then in the fall, is it only literally one time during the spring you put on, or is it several times?
It depends on, you could put some nitrogen fertilizer, which is most commonly split up. Some people put it on 4 to 5 times a year.
Okay.
That's very high management. Most people, I'd say, will put some on in April and put some on in like late August.
Okay.
Because most of our grasses are cool season, so they grow really good in the spring. Come summer, they kind of slow down. Like we don't mow our lawn sometime in July or August because it gets dry. But then when it cools off and it gets moist again in the fall, they grow well. So Usually put some nitrogen on in the spring, and then late summer for September.
How much would you say would like fertilizer for 1 acre cost approximately?
A bag of urea, which is straight nitrogen, is about $20, and we would put on like a bag, 100 pounds. So it's 2 bags, $40 an acre,
Okay.
probably each time. So you're looking at $90 to $100 an acre. Yeah. So you think of that, and that'll produce 2 or 3 tons of hay. So you think about you're paying a couple $100 a ton for hay, and if you were to spend $100 on fertilizer, you could increase your pasture yield by a few tons. So it really saves some value in that. But it's not just the fertilizer that makes the pasture grow, but you need that nutrients to grow it. Yeah. And I'm not going to get much into fertilization, but a lot of it stems back to the soil test. And without knowing how much you need to put on, you're just guessing. And fertilizer has been expensive in the past 5 years, and it's not looking to get any cheaper. So just by saying, oh, I think I'll put on this amount, you're putting yourself at a much greater risk of spending more money than you have to, because you may have high fertility already because of the horse manure. I don't see many pastures that are really, really low in fertility. Usually they need some nitrogen, and they make the grass grow quite well. So how do we make a schedule? Can you say, well, I'm going to do this and do it on a calendar? It's really tough to say, to plan your whole grazing schedule at the beginning of the year, because it's going to change. This year, we had rain every week. Grass grew all summer long, which is rare. Usually there's a few weeks in the summer it gets really dry at some period, and we don't mow our lawns. And you think, well, if you're not mowing your yard, your pastures are growing, and we can see a lot of times where their pastures get overgrazed in the summertime. It's not muddy, but the grass is growing and it's grazed down close, and it takes a long time to recover once it does get moisture. So if you look down and you see the tops of your shoes, it's probably too overgrazed, and they should be moved to an exercise lot. So midsummer, often be a time to get them on an exercise lot. Probably have to feed hay. And this year, if you were managing them with some rotational grazing, you probably didn't have to do that. So go out and look at your pastures. Try and plan ahead. I have a neighbor that I make a little hay for that has 2 horses, a pony, and another small horse. I don't know exactly what it is, but she's got four horses, I would say. She's got about 4 acres that she grazes all the time, and she's got another 4 acres that I make hay on for her first cutting hay, which is made in early June. And then after that, she'll let it grow back, but she'll graze it in the fall. Because she can't keep up with that grass in the spring. There's too much grass growing in like April and May. But by the summer, late summer, she needs more grass because the other pastures have been overgrazed. So she grazes on the hayfield that we make, and then she feeds the hay over winter. So it's a pretty good system that she's got going there. She knows if she tried to graze all 8 acres at one time in the spring, they wouldn't utilize it as well. They'd waste a fair amount. She'd end up having to mow it and wouldn't get the best use of that grass. So by splitting it up, grazing on one side, making hay on the other, she has hay, and then she has some later grazing in the later summer. And she'll actually graze that into the early winter. She strip grazes it, meaning if this is the field, she'll start on one end and work her way down to the other. So they always want to move up to where the grass is. But giving them the whole field, they tend to pick their spots. So you might have a plan, but you're going to have to adjust to the grass condition and keep records. It never hurts to write down notes about when you did what. Did you fertilize? Did you mow? It's nice to look back and see what you did previous years. And there's want to see your reaction to that picture. What do you, most people go, ah. And I go, can you see your ribs? And I see this stuff. Is that a pasture? Where is that? In a swamp? I don't know. It looks, I say, what a terrible condition to have their foal and the mare there. I don't know what she's eating, where she's getting her nutrition. Obviously not enough of it. But other audiences will go, oh, look at the baby foal. So you get her on some good grass, you know? So what's your perspective? That's the big thing, you know. If you're too focused on the baby foal and not looking at mom and looking at the conditions of the field, you know, just keep your perspective in mind and try and see the big picture, because there's a lot of opportunity in pasture management. It can be financially to your benefit, environmentally to your benefit to keep your pastures green and healthy, and it's good for your animals too to have your horses on quality pasture. That's all for this first section. I do have another piece on rotational grazing. So I'm going to get into that. Any questions before we move on to rotational grazing? We're going to take a break after this next one and talk about that. Yes.
So if you have more than exercise lot, is there any way to make sure you maintain at least some cover of the grass so it's not even just something like?
So in the exercise lot, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but really planning where you put the exercise lot. If it's right next to a building and you have like rainwater coming down, having rain gutters on is a good thing so that any manure on that lot isn't collected, doesn't run off with the water. Trying to have it at the top of the hill or near the top of the hill if possible, so it's usually drier soil. And making it as small as possible.
Okay.
As small as you feel that your horse can still get exercise in the end, but you know, an acre exercise lot may be bigger than it needs to be if you only have a few acres of pasture to deal with. Maybe if it's longer and skinnier, so they can still run, but that's probably some of the key things. Rain gutters in the buildings is actually important. It's something that the conservation district and the conservation folks encourage, because you want to keep any clean water from getting in contact with manure, because it just adds that much more water you have to try and filter out. And having good grass around it, so any water that does run off is then filtered through grass. Grass is a great filter. It's a natural filter. It'll capture the manure solids and the nutrients that are in that and hold it and utilize it in the grass. So sizing is probably one of the most important things. Don't make it any bigger than it needs to be. Other questions or comments? Yes.
The farm that I work at, her pastures are really small just because she doesn't have a lot of space in general. So she rakes the fields to kind of spread the manure around. Is that like on its own helpful, or does she need to do more to it?
Does she do it for parasite control too? She doesn't collect it, she just spreads it out.
She just spreads it to help the grass.
I think it's good for parasite control too, but it exposes that manure pile. I like it because it spreads those nutrients around, so it's not just a pile of manure, it's spread around. I think that's fine. Some people wouldn't go to that effort, but it's actually better. Do they graze around those raked areas more than they would if it was unraked? Have you ever noticed that?
Not really, they kind of just go everywhere.
Yeah. And do they kind of have to because there's not as much to...
Yeah, they're really small pastures, and there's only like 2 or 3 horses in there at a time, so they're kind of just in whatever spot they feel like standing. So.
I know some people will collect manure even from the pastures, and I think that's a lot of work. But I think the key is that even if you collect it, either put it in a compost area or something so that you can utilize those nutrients for fertilizer, because you can grow. It's it's good nutrients there. So, and composting is a nice way to reduce the volume. If you think about how much manure you have, if you let it compost in some different staging bins over 6 to 8 months, you can reduce that volume by half or more. So there's that much less to handle. Okay. I stick a cow in here just because of So rotational grazing. There's been a lot of beef producers, sheep producers, dairies that have gone 100% grazing. Grass-fed beef. Grazing dairies that only feed their animals hay or pasture. And in the summertime, they're feeding their cows 100% grass. Sometimes they bring it back to the barn and they give them a little bit of grain at milking time. But these guys that graze, that is their crop. I mean, that's their main focus. The cows are their main focus, but their pastures are everything. And they do an excellent job of making sure that they're planning ahead. That they are thinking about, where am I going to graze my animals next week, tomorrow, 2 weeks from now? Is that grass getting too tall? We think about hay. Hay is typically long and stemmy, and when we're mowing hay, the hay's 4 feet tall, and it's in head. We do that because it yields more, but the quality isn't as good as our pastures that are 8 to 10 feet tall. The leafy material on this is a lot of fiber or lignin in here that makes it able to stand up, but it's not as palatable. So that small leafy grass is much more palatable, has much more protein. You need to watch it that you don't get your horses founder on that if they haven't been exposed to it. But for livestock growers, that's what they want. Dairy, they want to have good quality feed that's going to produce milk or meat. And same thing with your horses. If you want to save hay, you want to have a good pasture to feed your animals. So without that sunlight and rain, it's probably one of our key factors. We're going to get green plants, we're going to have plant growth. And if we have plant growth with our grazing animals, we're going to be making money or saving money, depending on what way you want to look at it. So that's key. So what else is involved? What's best for the grass? Think about growing a grass crop, not necessarily managing your horses. You're using your livestock, your horses to manage your grass. But what does your horse need? What does the livestock need? And what gets you towards your goal? So what's the next thing you can do to improve that on your operation? So when we talk about traditional pastures, it's just a perimeter fence around the outside and open up the gate and let them run, right? So they're out there continuously, night and day. This would be spring through fall, but I see a lot of mostly horse owners, but some livestock owners that they graze 365 days out of the year. The pastures, the horses are in the pasture all winter. And I drive by and what are you doing? There's no grass to start with. Any grass that might be there, they've eaten it down to the dirt. The grass won't grow in March. March a little bit, but January certainly not. So you're not grazing most of your pastures in the winter, unless you've done a lot of work and have stockpiled your grass, where you let it get fairly big in the fall, and you go in there and have them eat that taller grass in the winter. But you're going to get lower yields with these continuously grazed pastures. You'll get serious weed pressures, as we see in a number of pastures, because it's a lot of exposed ground for weeds to come through. You're going to get gullies, erosion, washing through those fields, and it's just really not managed. They're just letting them roam free. And unfortunately, that's where I see a number of pastures in that category. But as we think about rotational grazing, we're dividing these pastures into smaller blocks. So So we're taking a big square and we're going to split it into smaller cubes. So we let 3 of the 4 areas rest as we graze the 1. And it might take a month till we get back to that pasture again. So what's that rest period do? What's the advantage? Can anybody tell me why do we want to give it 3 weeks rest?
Prevent from overgrazing.
Yep. So what we'll do while it's resting,
What we do.
what will the grass be doing while it's resting?
Growing.
It's growing, absolutely. So I say we don't mow our yards every day, right? We mow once a week, once every 10 days. We mow when we need to. So think of your horse as a lawnmower. You might let him out in that area once a week, but in a way, we let our grass in the pasture get a little taller. Maybe it's 8 to 12 inches tall, and it takes a few weeks for it to do that. But you also want to graze less short, should I say. We don't want to graze down to the ground. We want to leave 3 inches, dare I say, of grass when we take the animals out. A lot of times people will be happy to have 3 inches of grass at all to start with. But at that point is when you move them to the next section. So as that grass is resting, it's renewing its energy reserves. A lot of some of our taller grasses that produce more, like Timothy, orchard grass, they store their energy in their stem. So if we take that stem down to the ground, it weakens the plant. So that's why we don't graze lower than 3 inches in many cases. It allows that plant to rebuild its vigor, and it helps that plant survive longer. It doesn't weaken it, so it can be more healthy. A healthy plant will live longer. So there's some people that call me and say, I'm going to reseed my pasture again. I said, when did you reseed it last time? Oh, last spring. And they, why reseed every spring? I said, well, so what's going to be different this year if you reseed? When you call me next year, what are you going to do differently? Well, look, like, what do you mean? Well, obviously there's something not right with your management that makes you have to reseed your pasture every year. You might need to spot seed a little bit, but to think you need to reseed it every year, you're probably overgrazing, or maybe you need to do a soil test and see what's the root of the problem. So allowing for that long-term vigor or plant population to stay there in the field. So then there's another term that you may or may not be aware of, but intensive rotational grazing. That's taking it to the next level. That's some dairy farmers actually only graze an area for 12 hours. So they'll give the cows an overnight area to feed, and then after milking in the morning, they'll move to a new area. So they're moving their animals twice a day. That's much more intensive than I think a horse hunter would do. You might rotate theirs every 3, 4, 5 days or a week. If I can get people to move them after a week, I feel like I've accomplished something. If I can just get them to move them every week, that would be great. So we got that higher level management. We got more paddocks. So instead of having 4, you might have 8 or 10 in that square. You're going to have shorter grazing periods. Maybe it's only a day, and the rest periods are also going to be longer. But I don't see many horse operations using that. So here's your traditional pasture. You got your perimeter fence around the outside, your shelter in the middle, and your water, and they graze. And that's what we see. But if you want to do a little more management, try and utilize your pastures better, allow to have better stocking rates. Maybe have 2 horses on 2 acres or something like that. You would fence the interior area of the field. This is your sacrifice area. So they still have access to shelter and water. I would use this all winter, and in the summer if it gets dry. But you can open this gate and let them go in this area for a week. Close that gate, have them go down here. They can still come back to the shoulder. They can still go to the water. And they can come to this pasture and eat. And they can still run back and forth in here if they wish. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we're back to here again and rotate them that way. And it's not a huge amount of work, and it's a good start. And that's what I encourage anybody to try, at least break into 2 or 3 paddocks or pastures to let your pastures rest a little bit. But as I mentioned before, if you have different groups of horses, so you got 3 here and 2 here, and this one doesn't get along with anybody, so he's over here, you can't really rotate very well when you already have 3 of the pastures used and only 1 resting. So think about how you might make this work for your operation. So this would just be the intensive route where they'd split these again, and you'd have more pastures in the same area, but you'd move the horses or the animals more frequently. I wouldn't see this on an equine operation as much as the livestock operation. Now, if we have too many horses or too many animals on this traditional pasture, it can become an exercise lot. It's going brown. And, maybe it's 1 horse, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, 4, 5, how many we could cram in there? 6, 7, I'd say put a few more in there, right? But if they have access to that whole area all the time, most likely you're just going to end up with a brown field. You might get some green here and there, but put that grout out in the middle, split it up and try and, at least you'll have green around the outside. You still have a dirt lot in the middle, but you're going to have a dirt lot anyway. You might as well keep it smaller and get some feed out of that other area and make it look aesthetically pleasing, make it productive and not environmentally detrimental. This is an interesting chart here. It talks about forage production in a 2-acre grass. This is grass pasture. So in 2 acres, and here's how much a horse needs. This is the minimal amount of feed, about 900 pounds of forage. So in May, that 2-acre grass pasture can produce almost 3,000 pounds of feed, well exceeding that 1 horse's needs. And this is with good management. I make the point. This is with good fertility. We've done the right pasture management. You can see that the yield or the amount that pasture produces comes down. So June there's less forage. July there's about as much, but still less than May. In August, late July, August time frame, we barely met the needs of our horse in August in 2 acres for that 1 horse with good management. Why is that? Typically, what do we see in August?
So the weather changing?
Yeah, it's our dry period, usually hot. So that's your July, August time frame. But then we get the tropical system, rains come back more frequently in the fall, and now we get a bump up in September. We get some grass, but come October, it gets colder. The grass doesn't grow as quickly, and now we can't even meet the needs of our horse in October. But you can see in the spring, lots of feed. But then it starts to taper down from there, a little bump in the fall. So there's always plenty of grass in the spring. Now, if we look at poor management, even when there's lots of grass, you can't even meet the need of 1 horse on 2 acres. And it just goes down from there. So your management can make a world of difference. This is grass, and if we throw the legumes on there, under clover or alfalfa, most of the time we clover, they'll produce even a little bit more when it gets hotter and drier. They have a better root system, they can get water. But still there's less